The idea of a world to be created out of nothingness, a sonic boom that occurred one day and we came into existence. The Big Bang Theory has mentions in the Rig Veda, especially in the Nasadiya Sukta, where they talk about how our universe too was created with this loud sonic boom and we came into existence. You'd be shocked to know that the first ever rhinoplasty was performed here in India by Shreshtha. Oftentimes, we consider most of the Indian science as mythology, as something related to faith, or maybe pseudoscience which doesn't really exist and it's all mere theories that exist in our head. And because of this mindset, we dismiss these major contributions. We have a large panel here filled with educators, learners, people who are shaping the education system of India. Last year, I was especially moved by this one talk about how the Indian education system is not even Indian, but a sham set up by Macaulay and the Britishers and the colonizers. And it made me realize how much of our history, how much of our sciences are buried under the ancient texts. Now, I have a question for all of you. How many of you are intrigued by science, even a little? Even if you don't study it, how many of you get inspired by science? Well, quite a few of you. I want to ask you another question. Have you heard of the golden ratio? The golden ratio, also known as the Fibonacci sequence, is this fancy term that talks about how every beautiful thing in this world is described by this circle which extends as it grows larger, right? Doubled in size. But what if I told you this Fibonacci sequence was actually discovered by an Indian scientist named Pingla? Have you heard of Pingla? I am sure not. It's because when the colonizers came in, a lot of our history, a lot of our science, a lot of our technology were buried under these papers. And it's not only about reclaiming credit, it's not only about reclaiming a piece of our history, but also reclaiming our identity. Now, I'm pretty sure, as I mentioned in my introduction as well, I'm really fond of the Big Bang Theory. The idea of a world to be created out of nothingness, a sonic boom that occurred one day and we came into existence, sounds so big, larger than life, to imagine that everything was existent, yet non-existent. Well, you'd be shocked to know that the Big Bang Theory has mentions in the Rig Veda, especially in the Nasadiya Sukta, where they talk about how our universe too was created with this loud sonic boom and we came into existence. It describes the time before creation. It describes the time before the modern science could even comprehend what actually happened. It took modern science so many years to reach to the conclusion of the Big Bang Theory, which is still not proven yet. But our Vedas, our Upanishads, got onto it way back. Now, I find another theory to be super cool, which is a string theory. I'll tell you a little about it. So, in our science textbooks, we are told that if we zoom in into an atom, right, what do we find? Well, according to string theory, if I zoom into the littlest of particles, I am going to find little pieces of vibrating strings. And those strings tie together and weave the fabric of our universe. And not only our universe, but also us. Every atom, every cell is woven out of this single little vibrating thread. Well, another example of how our Upanishads also mention a little vibrating string called a sutra, which is again the heart of the string theory. Now, is it a mere coincidence that we are not sure what is happening, or did our ancestors learn about science way before we did? How many of you here have heard about the Nalanda University? The university which was burning for about 90 days, right? Nalanda University was established in the 5th century and had so much literature to it until it was destroyed. Before that, it looked something like this. And according to Chinese scholars, Nalanda University was not only known for the vastness in its literature, but also how structured it was and also how rational it was. Sounds similar to our modern day science, right? Well, one thing that I was really fed up in 10th grade was studying about the Pythagorean theorem. I spent so much of my time, especially during my SATs, where I had to just learn all of it. A square plus B square is equal to C square. But what if I told you that Babylonian, Egyptian, and even Indian mathematics came to this conclusion before Pythagoras ever did? Now, it's not only about we reached it first or we understood it first. It's solely about why do we ignore our scientific discoveries? Now, one thing that's really popular on the internet, you must have heard of maybe getting an eye surgery or maybe a rhinoplasty. And you'd be shocked to know that the first ever rhinoplasty was performed here in India by Shreshtha. Yes. And you'd be shocked to know in the Royal Australian College of Surgeons in Melbourne, they actually have a larger than life statue of Shreshtha because they consider him the father of surgery. But it's sad that as a citizens of this nation, we are unable to recognize his efforts. What he did to do modern science, what he did to create a world that we live in. Now, one thing that I realized while I was researching and reading about all of this, that oftentimes we consider most of the Indian science as mythology, as something related to faith, or maybe pseudoscience, which doesn't really exist, and it's all mere theories that exist in our head. And because of this mindset, we dismiss these major contributions. Now, I'm not saying that modern science is entirely wrong. I'm just saying, let's imagine a world where Nalanda University meets artificial intelligence, where students read about our literature taking the help of AI. Or let's take the example of Sushruth, where his technologies meet robotic surgeries. Now, one question that arises is that what is the difference between fact and a faith? And how long does it take to cross this line in between? What do we consider as the reality and what do we consider as a mere mirage is the real question. And I'd like to end our conversation with one question. Where do facts end and where does faith begin? Thank you.